What's up, everybody, man? Back. Welcome to a brand new video, and today we are doing the 36th episode of Godzilla-Thon. That is right. After 7 years, it is time for Godzilla-Thon to return. The last Godzilla-Thon I did was for Godzilla Planet of the Monsters back on January 31st, 2018. I cannot believe how long ago that was. It really doesn't feel like that long ago to me, but that was the last Godzilla-Thon I did, and there's been quite a few Godzilla movies since then. So to celebrate hitting 101,954 subscribers, aka 1954, I wanted to relaunch Godzilla-Thon, and with this relaunch of Godzilla-Thon, I'm going back to the original style. I'm gonna keep doing these reviews in the same exact format I did them back in the day, a detailed, in-depth, plot-by-plot, beat-by-beat breakdown of each movie in a podcast-styled format, and I'll take us all the way to the newest Godzilla film. At the moment, it's Godzilla Kong: The New Empire, and that way the original run of Godzilla-Thon can be completed, at least for now. And so today we're jumping into the very controversial Godzilla City on the edge of battle. This thumbnail art I did all the way back in 2019. I did this in May 2019 because I was originally going to resume Godzilla-Thon back in 2019, and then I made Kong-a-thon my priority, and then that obviously had its own delays and such. But now we're here for Godzilla-Thon. We're back. It's time. So today, I'm gonna run you through what is generally considered to be like everybody's least favorite Godzilla movie. It's considered like the worst Godzilla movie, but you know what? Hot take? I think that this movie's fantastic. I really think it is, and the longer it sits with me, the more I watch it, the more I appreciate it. So, in a way, I'm gonna be defending the hell out of Godzilla City on the Edge of Battle because I think it has such an unearned reputation. I think it is truly a very well-written movie, and maybe one of the, not like the best, but maybe one of the more well-written Godzilla movies that is out there. It's just really light on spectacle, which is what everybody wanted. The Godzilla Anime Trilogy really suffers from one thing overall, and that is expectation. People wanted it to be Final Wars the anime. They wanted a Godzilla Rulers of Earth adaptation in an anime format, and instead, we got these really slow philosophical movies. And, you know, that's not everybody's cup of tea, but you know what? I think that this is a very well-written movie. I think it is shockingly well done, especially because in memory, this is the weakest of the trilogy. I always remember like Monster Planet has some fun elements to it, especially towards the ending of the movie. It really kicks off with Godzilla Earth, and then especially Godzilla the Planet Eater I've really grown to love, but this one, City on the Edge of Battle, I always remember being the weakest link, and I'll say, after rewatching Godzilla Planet of the Monsters, both the English and Japanese dubs, before jumping into both the English and Japanese dub of Godzilla City on the Edge of Battle, I don't feel that way anymore. I think Monster Planet's still very good, but I do think it's the weakest link. I think that this movie really is where they hit their stride. I really do think that this is solid. I know that people wanted it to be Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla, the all-out crazy anime, and I know that there's that fan animation that's got Mechagodzilla fighting Godzilla for like 30 minutes, but that's not what I come to Godzilla movies for. The thing that makes Godzilla so special is the deeper meanings, the intention, the plot, the character, the story, the emotion. That's always what sets Godzilla apart. As far back as 1954, Godzilla was never just a generic monster movie, and the series has never just been monsters fighting, or at least at its best, it wasn't that. And this movie, I really think lives up to that. This movie addresses so many of the questions I've had about the Godzilla series, like, well, maybe not a ton, but you know, it addresses one of the biggest in a way that I think is really clever, which is, what is the purpose of Mechagodzilla? I mean, just from a conceptual standpoint, if you can build something that can kill Godzilla, a weapon, why not just build a weapon? Why does Absolute Zero need to be mounted on Mechagodzilla? Why not mount Absolute Zero on a cannon and then have a bunch of support drones fight Godzilla, keeping his attention while you freeze him and kill him? It's just because Mechagodzilla is a very fun 70s concept. That's why Mechagodzilla exists. It has no practical use in reality. I mean, if you can build a laser that can cut through Godzilla's face, you can just build the laser to do it. I guess actually GVK makes a pretty good argument for what Mechagodzilla's use is, and that's just to pry his jaws open. But on the whole, Mechagodzilla just is kind of silly, and this movie directly addresses that head on. Mechagodzilla, they directly acknowledge, is kind of an outdated tactic to take on Godzilla, and if they have have the technology to build something to fight Godzilla that can kill him, why not just build a big gun that can kill him? Why do you have to go through the whole ordeal of Mechagodzilla? So I understand why people are not the biggest fan of this movie. I understand why it's a letdown, and it's just that for me, it doesn't let me down. I'm okay with it. I know that people love Godzilla fighting monsters, and so do I, but I have movies where he does that. If I want to watch Godzilla fight Mechagodzilla, there's of course the original movies. There's the Heisei movie if you want it to be a bit more of like a beam battle. Then there's the movies that I think really nail it perfectly, which is the Kiryu saga, and now we even have Godzilla vs. Kong. This movie provides a very different alternative to that scenario, the Godzilla versus technology scenario, one that I think is truly fantastic and compelling. I did a video back in the day on how Mechagodzilla City is the perfect foil for Godzilla Earth, and I completely stand by that. All this preamble just to say, I get why it's not everybody's favorite, and in fact, I understand why this movie's many people's least favorite Godzilla movie, but for me, this one really works. And it just happens to be one of those movies that came out back in the day, you know, back when this channel was in its stride, and so I have a lot of very fond memories of this movie and the era and covering it in the lead up and aftermath. In particular, I have mostly fond memories of the Planet Eater, but I'm sure I'll get there next video. And without further ado, let's talk about Godzilla City on the Edge of Battle. The second installment of the Godzilla Anime Trilogy was released just 6 months after Godzilla Monster Planet in Japan. That is a super fast turnaround for Godzilla movies. This released in May 2018, and it was done by Polygon Pictures and Toho Animation. Instead of going full-on action-packed, crazy over-the-top, this movie had a really low budget, and so they opted for a psychological drama over action spectacle, and for me that's alright. We pick up moments after Monster Planet with the Aratarum? I still to this day don't know how to say that spaceship's name. I don't think they ever say it in the movies. We pick up moments after Monster Planet with the Aratarum picking up the remaining signals revealing Godzilla Earth has destroyed all of the transport ships after the death of Godzilla Filius. Realizing Godzilla's atomic breath can reach low orbit, a debate breaks out over if they should evacuate and abandon the survivors or if they should wait, try and see if there's survivors, but risk getting killed by Godzilla. And these are the types of philosophical debates that this movie really excels with. We then pick up right where the post-credits scene left off, with Haruo waking up in a native's hut. He's covered in this orange dust, and he discovers that humans can safely live in areas below where the toxic tree fog will reach. Honestly, the toxic tree fog is one of the least developed elements of the Godzilla Anime Trilogy, and one of the things that I think they do the worst, which is just making the environment like this foggy, gloomy, in a way very dull to look at. It gets very repetitive to look at environment, and I don't even really know the purpose because the Hatua can live in it just fine. So like, what does it symbolically mean? Just that I guess Earth has moved on from humanity? While trying to locate his friends, Haruo is saved from a servum's nest, a servum larva nest with like these worm-like servums. I'm not a huge fan of the servums, to be honest. I especially don't like how they're all one color, like just that bluish color, like that metallic blue. He's saved by the native, Miana. Meanwhile, Yuko and some survivors battle a nearly identical native. Haruo saves Miana from being accidentally killed by his friends. I don't know why they want to open fire on a human so bad. Even if that human scared them, it seems like they're kind of antagonizing that fight, as the Hatua don't strike me as the type to just kill you just because you're there, especially because they literally don't in a minute. But I guess they're scared and they might think she's a monster. So anyways, Haruo saves her from being killed, only for a bunch of natives to capture him and his friends. They take the survivors to their underground kingdom. I think that environment looks really pretty. It's really cool. There, they reunite with others, like Martin and Galagoo. Martin theorizes, and this is one thing that I think is funny, throughout the whole movie, Martin keeps throwing out these crazy theories that are often very pessimistic, and also like completely constantly downplaying the Hatua, only for him to be very often proved wrong. So Martin theorizes that the natives are actually evolved from insects rather than humans. I don't know really why he reaches that conclusion. Well, the Bilisaludo decide that they're too primitive to be considered human, which I think is so silly. Actually, they say that they're too primitive to be considered humanoid, which just isn't true. They are humanoid, even if they're primitive. They're taken to a ritual altar where they learn that the women are twins, Miana and Maina. I really wish there was even just a bit more of a difference between their names, because it still trips me up to this day which is which. Miana is the nicer one, Maina is the meaner one, the more aggressive one. But it is hard to tell them apart, and I also still don't know if I'm totally pronouncing Maina's name right. The natives are called the Hatua, and they worship an egg. I really like all the Mothra Easter eggs in here. They also learn the Hatua are telepathic, and can quickly learn. Like, this is one of those things that I think is so funny, because they act like they're like super primitive and and unadvanced and kind of dumb, but like they have mastered telepathy. Of course they wouldn't speak with a verbal language if they've mastered telepathy. I don't know how no one brings that point up the whole movie. The Hatua question why the gang is so violent, then reveal that Godzilla is also their enemy, because Godzilla is the enemy to their god, which I think is really cool. It's actually Godzilla is who killed their god, and the only thing their god left behind was an egg. The Hatua warned that anyone who has ever tried to take on Godzilla dies, which is why they've chosen to coexist with Godzilla. I think that that is really cool. The idea that like, no matter what you do, anybody who takes on Godzilla dies, it really solidifies his godlike status, kind of solidifies Mephi's whole prophecy. And also at the same time, it threads in those themes of coexistence, which obviously is like a Godzilla King of the Monsters thing, but it is in this trilogy. The whole idea of this whole trilogy is that you cannot fight things like Godzilla, you just must coexist with them in peace and harmony like the Hatua do. The Hatua are the template, not Haruo. We're not supposed to be inspired by him, and that's actually brought up later in this very movie. Martin discovers the Hatua are highly advanced and learns that Phileas, Godzilla Phileas, the Servum, and even the trees are all subspecies of Godzilla, which is explained a little differently in the English and Japanese versions. In the Japanese versions, they're all stated to be subspecies of Godzilla, adapting his traits in order to survive on the planet with him. Whereas in the English version, it's explained a little differently. It's said that they're not subspecies of Godzilla, they're still their own unique species, it's just that they have adapted traits from Godzilla in order to better survive his proximity. There's a divide in the gang with people like Bellobe, who remember fighting Godzilla 20 years earlier and how powerful he was and how hard it was to beat him, and then the younger humans, who don't have any memory of that at all, who think that they shouldn't continue fighting Godzilla and should leave. I really like that too, because it shows like, of course, people who remember fighting Godzilla back in the day, coming off the victory of Godzilla Phileas, would view that as an overall victory and then a separate defeat at the hands of the original Godzilla, whereas of course the younger people view this whole thing as a suicide mission. It's then made very clear explicitly, which is only something that gets more context in the next movie, how guided Haruo is by Mephi's. I mean, even in this scene, he's directly reflecting on a conversation he had with Mephi's, and it's only once he reflects on that that he's reaffirmed in his decision to fight Godzilla again, because Mephis has convinced him it's his destiny. It's his destiny to destroy Godzilla. It's very clear throughout this whole movie that Haruo is basically coming up against his own feelings, which are that he should abandon the fight with Godzilla, and the way he's essentially been programmed by years of influence from Mephis to continue fighting Godzilla at all costs. I love that setup here. It's so well written. It's not overt and in your face. Other than this one flashback, you only get scenes where whenever Haruo is like a little lost or unsure of himself, he wishes Mephis was there to tell him what to do, and it becomes very clear Mephis has been telling him what to do his whole life. I think that that is a great way to sow the seeds for the next film, and why it's such a struggle for Haruo to overcome Mephis in the next movie. The Aratrum then discovers that Godzilla patrols the same path. It's the same pattern that he patrols. Meanwhile, Haruo and the humans search for a landing ship through a signal they detected. The natives then reveal their names as Miana and Mina. Mina is more aggressive and combat ready. Yuko is then jealous of them and their fondness of Haruo. I don't like the subplot with Yuko and Haruo. I don't really know how I feel about Yuko anymore. I used to hate her guts. I hated her. I don't hate her anymore as much as I don't really understand the purpose of that character in the first movie. They treat her like she's got this really deep pre-established relationship with Haruo, while at the same time treating it like they don't really know each other and haven't really interacted up to this point. Like it's like they can't decide. On the one hand, it seems like Haruo has a really close connection to her grandpa. On the other hand, I don't know if him and her actually have that much history. I also am unsure of the age gap between those two, but one thing I'm sure of is that she feels very strongly for him and he doesn't really feel as strongly for her. Because she's all upset about the twins' fondness of Haruo, Yuko then runs off into the servant pit. This scene's a little weird. I don't know why the tentacles tentacle the way they do. It's a little suspicious, man. I don't think that they needed to attack her in quite that way, but they like literally wrap around her legs and pull her legs apart before trying to eat her. It's a little suggestive, I would say. It's odd. She's then saved by the Hautua's nanometal arrows. Adult servums then attack, but are defeated by Mephis, my favorite dude, who shows up with the surviving infantry discovery. Then, as Mori abandons the search for the survivors, the EXIF leader receives a message through a device called Garbatrium from the EXIF god, warning them that the survivors will contact them shortly. This is also something that I'm very interested. Does that mean that Ghidorah is waiting because he's hungering, like kind of like Galactus? He hungers to eat the earth and he really wants to. I'm guessing that's kind of what it is, because they're getting a message from Ghidorah. Ghidorah is sending them a message being like, hey, don't leave yet. Things are gonna go the way you want. Like, Ghidorah can kind of see the future, it seems. And so he's warning them to hang out and wait. And sure enough, they do get a message just immediately afterward. Mephies gets a message to the ship. In return, an extract ship is sent down to collect the survivors and get them out of there. Haruo explains once the ship lands that he still plans to fight Godzilla with the help of the Bilisoluto and the newly discovered nanometal. They explain that the nanometal can only be caused by Mechagodzilla, as he was the last remaining source of nanometal, and therefore, if there's nanometal, it means Mechagodzilla is still around somewhere. Turns out the Hautua have discovered nanometal, and they've learned to fuse things with it on a molecular level. Kind of like the nanometal just instantly fuses whatever touches it. I don't know how that means it's not constantly spreading to the ground that it sits on, but whatever, move on. This actually allows the Hautua to enhance their weapons with nanometal. However, it's important to note they don't rely on it, and it's not a really essential part of their culture. In fact, they view it as straight up poisonous. I think that's really important because there's people that are like, well, how come the Hautua get to use nanometal? If nanometal's ultimately at the end of this movie, the theme of the movie is that we should reject something like nanometal, why do the Hautua get to use it? Because that's not what the theme of the movie is. The theme of the movie isn't that we should reject technology. The theme of the movie is that we should reject an over-reliance on it to the point that we sacrifice our own humanity. And the Hautua have not sacrificed their own humanity. They have once again found a way to coexist with the nanometal. To ensure that Mechagodzilla wouldn't proliferate, we actually find out that they use some sort of inhibitor placed on Mechagodzilla that would stop the nanometal from spreading. Maybe that's why the nanometal doesn't spread all the time to the things that it sits on. But anyways, it turns out that during Godzilla's attack on Mount Fuji back in the day, Godzilla destroyed parts of Mechagodzilla, including parts of his inhibitor. Therefore, the nanometal has been allowed to spread. A few humans actually retreat back to space, but not the humans that come down to pick them up. I always think that's interesting, that the humans who come down to pick people up wind up listening to Haruo's speech and joining his cause. Most join Haruo in discovering the source of the nanometal and just sticking with him in seeing where things are gonna go, hoping that his plan will work to kill Godzilla. Martin reveals then that if all life on Earth evolved traits of Godzilla in order to survive, then humanity must have done something similar in order to survive this world of monsters, on this planet of the monsters. They must have developed some sort of traits from an insect kaiju in order to survive, which is why they have some sort of insect level qualities to them, like the scaly dust that they produce. Martin explains then, only now, halfway through the second movie, that kaiju evolved due to global warming, pollution, and nuclear testing. This is what gave birth to the kaiju, and in particular, the nuclear testing is what gave birth to Godzilla. So they retain their generally original origins. It's just not all of them are nuclear. Some of them are more like monsters created from pollution, whereas Godzilla seems to be the nuclear monster. Because Godzilla has stopped this harm to the planet, defeating humanity in a sense, Earth then chose Godzilla as God, and all life adapted in his favor. I think that's a very interesting way to look at it. It's very Godzilla King of the Monsters, and actually, it's a little more interestingly done because Godzilla King of the Monsters sets up those wonderful ideas, and then it's never followed upon in the Monsterverse. Whereas here, this is a full trilogy unpacking that, yeah, if the kaiju are nature's balance, then nature would be in their favor. It's just something interesting to think, like, from a certain perspective, from the planet's perspective, humanity is kind of the villains. The Servum attack again on the way to Mechagodzilla, but detecting Godzilla's DNA is in the area, the ground erupts into these nanometal spikes, killing and absorbing the Servum into nanometal, turning them into it, leading to the discovery of Mechagodzilla City. Probably the single most divisive thing this trilogy does. Instead of having Mechagodzilla, it turns out Mechagodzilla was pretty much entirely destroyed back in the day, but he did activate. He just chose not to go to combat with Godzilla, or at least he was attacked too quickly before he could. The result was that some of Mechagodzilla survived and continued its mission to take down Godzilla, realizing that it couldn't rebuild itself to fight Godzilla properly, as it knew it would lose that battle. It instead opted to become a city, an ever-evolving Mechagodzilla City that grew over 20,000 years. It's actually in the ruins of the whole Mechagodzilla was destroyed in, and has generally rebuilt the facility Mechagodzilla was built in the first place, with some Mechagodzilla AI additions. They find the downed head of Mechagodzilla, realizing that some of his AI unit is still intact, while some of it has been blown apart. This is why Mechagodzilla is kind of not fully actively operating. It's only sort of passively going about its mission. Fully reactivating Mechagodzilla, the city comes to life with some awesome music. I love that scene. And then we find out that rather than building Mechagodzilla, again, it's just an impractical thing to do. Instead, they transform the entire city into a Godzilla execution trap. I love that. It's here 44 minutes in, about halfway through the movie, that we glimpse the sleeping Godzilla. Now, sometimes Godzilla does take about 40 minutes to appear in a movie, especially those American movies, but this does feel like it takes particularly long to get to Godzilla, and even now he's just sleeping. I don't know how Godzilla could sleep for 20,000 years, immediately wake up and then go to sleep less than like a couple hours later, but dude sleeps. That's all Godzilla Earth really does. Turns out that Godzilla's patrol is basically all around the city, as the city has a natural camouflage that Godzilla cannot detect it. So Godzilla knows something's in the area and has been lurking trying to find it, but for 20,000 years never has detected it just due to the camouflage. And that also explains why Godzilla-Phileus lived in this area as well. It perfectly explains why Mechagodzilla City, Godzilla Earth, and Godzilla-Phileus would all be in generally the same exact location. It's not an over-convenience or anything, it's that basically Godzilla-Phileus and Godzilla Earth were hunting for Mechagodzilla City this whole time. By reactivating the city, Godzilla stands a much better shot of finding out where they are, so they're trying to speedrun things. The mechs from the last movie are upgraded into the Vultures. I think the Vultures are awesome. I love their design. I love the pink-purple things that shoot out of them. They're jets, and I love the streaks they leave through the air. I also love how they like shoot in 90-degree angles. I think that they are so cool. They might be my favorite non-Mechagodzilla mechs in the Godzilla series, and are certainly my favorite human-built little like weapons if you're gonna put them in the category of like Super X or Argo Jet. The Vultures are my favorite. I think they're fantastic. I think they're really cool. They devise a plan to basically transform Mechagodzilla City into an upgraded version of their previous Godzilla trap, which has already proven successful in killing Godzilla-Phileus. With this nanometal mist they're going to use to disperse Godzilla's atomic breath, they can build this, basically, it's a giant hallway that lures Godzilla into a kill point. I actually think it's a really, really cool idea. It's especially cool because it upgrades us from like a completely natural way to fight Godzilla, nature against Godzilla, into purely technology against Godzilla. However, this plan will require a lot of time, and so therefore they're worried that Godzilla will wake up and find them first. Mephies then has the Bilisoludo repair an Exif Gamatron crystal, which was previously destroyed during Godzilla's original attack on the lab. I also think that's great. It explains why the Exif haven't executed their Ghidorah plan sooner. We then find out that both the Hautua and humans have become suspicious of the Bilisoludo and the nanometal. Mephies doesn't trust it either. This causes Haruo to start having doubts. He realizes that he has an obsession with Godzilla. He's not the only one, man. I do too. I don't know what's up with that. But he realizes he has an obsession with Godzilla, and it's all for personal reasons. It's all about revenge for him. He finally comes to this realization that it was never really about human pride, and for him it's about his own hurt. You know, this is a big moment for him. He starts to realize that while he can never let go of this anger, and he will always want to fight Godzilla, he shouldn't involve others, which I would say he doesn't really. I mean, he gives them the chance multiple times in both the last movie and this movie, with multiple speeches being like, you can join me or you don't have to. You do not have to, and everybody volunteers to join him just because he's persuasive. And here again, Haruo still can't shake the influence of Mephies, who's like, no dude, this is your destiny. You're destined to fight Godzilla, and people chose you as their leader. Mephies is constantly working him in these small ways. I think it's great. And here's where we get the ultimate conclusion of the trilogy. It's set up right here, a little over halfway through City on the Edge of Battle. We find out why the trilogy ends the way it does. Yuko reveals that Haruo is an inspiration for the younger people around him. They simply can't remember Earth as it was, and they've become content with the depression, isolation, and coldness of outer space. That is, until Haruo staged his rebellion over the Taui immigration project, proving how abnormal all of this sadness and coldness around them is. Haruo's obsession with Godzilla proved to all of the humans on that ship, especially the younger ones, that you can stay mad at things that are unstoppable. You can learn to hate things that you can't forgive, and you can dedicate your life to revenge. Essentially, the lesson that Haruo has taught all the humans around him is that if you try hard enough, like he did, you can stand a shot of maybe getting a bit of vengeance in the way he killed Godzilla-Phileus. Haruo has inspired people to not become content with their subpar conditions and to not look for better, but instead to focus on their anger and see it through to the bitter end. That is the lesson Haruo has accidentally taught the people around him, and that it really weighs on him, because this is Yuko telling him that. Yuko's like, this is what you've taught me. You've taught me that you can dedicate yourself to revenge, and that's exactly the decision that'll get her killed in the end, and it's basically his fault. Haruo then starts having these pains and reveals that ever since he wound up at Mechagodzilla City, his previous wounds have really started hurting him again. Martin reveals that actually lots of the soldiers are having this same deal. They all have this pain, and realizes that it's all of the people who were previously treated by the Hautua. He doesn't know why yet. Again, setting up for the next movie. This also explains why the Hautua have a resistance to the nanometal, their little gold dust, and why they view it as a poison. They're basically resistant to it and it harms them. Everyone who was previously healed by the Hautua is re-healed by leaving the city, showing that the city is having a negative impact on them. Meanwhile, it's re-energized the Bilisaludo, taking away their need to eat and sleep and all that stuff. Mephies then gives this sermon to his growing congregation about how the Exif took to space after a monster destroyed their planet, and now they seek to guide other species to salvation. Haruo then meets up with Mephies and confesses that he feels lost, but Mephies reaffirms his leadership position and the sinister nature of nanometal, putting the seeds of doubt in Haruo even deeper, basically saying, yeah, you shouldn't trust the Bilisaludo, even if they can kill Godzilla. You don't want that. What you want is to do things on your terms. That's what you want. It's a really clever little seed of doubt he's planted here. He warns that if the Bilisaludo are so logical and mechanical, then can they really be considered highly intelligent as they start to lack compassion and emotional range? He warns that nanometal is indistinguishable from a monster. It's just a different type of monster. He explains that the Bilisaludo respect monsters and wish to become one with them. This is something he's probably learned through telepathy, listening to their thoughts. Mephies reveals that towards the end of many civilizations, most species wind up giving birth to monsters by mistake that wind up destroying them. Through technological advancement, they create monsters that wind up being their downfall. He says it's likely that Mechagodzilla is this monster for the Bilisaludo. We don't actually know that. For 20,000 years, Mechagodzilla has only taken over a small portion of the planet, and yes, while the Bilisaludo do dream of a world of a central intelligence, and back in the day it did seem like they had plans to conquer the Earth using Mechagodzilla, there's no real thing to suggest other than Mephies that Mechagodzilla City is truly evil or that the Bilisaludo will turn on humanity. All we learn is that the Bilisaludo want to take down Godzilla and want Mechagodzilla City to develop. It's very possible that in a world where they kill Godzilla, the Bilisaludo would have merged with Mechagodzilla City and gone on to be their own little thing. Maybe they would want to expand and take over the whole planet, but they never say they do, and there's really no indication other than Mephies that they want that. I think that's also very clever. The fact that, is Mephies even a reliable narrator here? Mephies then shares the secret name to Haruo of the monster that destroyed his planet and warns him that he must hang on to that. When he's fighting Godzilla, he must remember that there is a far more powerful monster that exists in space, and compared to that, Godzilla isn't worth the fear, so he should hang on to his resolve and do what he feels is best. I didn't remember this until just today. I was watching an old video of mine, but apparently back in the day we used to think that that shot from the trailer was Mephies kissing Haruo. What a different movie that would have been. Haruo then reassures Yuko that his goal is to reclaim the Earth for humans, not for the Bilisaludo or anything, but for humans. And so she kisses him in return, and it's very important to note he does not reciprocate. Both Miana and Mina watch on and are quite upset by this. Don't love the love triangle there either, but whatever. The Bilisaludo believe that everyone should reconvene in Mechagodzilla City to fight Godzilla. All the people on the spaceship should go down to Earth and join the battle. Meanwhile, the Exif use this as a way to preach for unification and joining together. You know, the Bilisaludo want to create a world where everybody is in harmony with each other. Well, now the Exif can bandwagon off of this to be like, yes, and you should do that by joining our religion. It's a great way to get them more followers and influence and power as well. The humans begin to fear that with Godzilla dead, there will be nothing to stop Mechagodzilla, and that soon the Bilisaludo will take over the planet. And although again, it's just human suspicion. They then, in Mechagodzilla City, discover Bilisaludo volunteers merging with the nanometal to fuel the battle with Godzilla. But it's important to note that even now, with the Bilisaludo merging with Mechagodzilla City and having ability to influence his AI, they don't force a nanometal takeover of the humans in the city to do the same. They allow them the ability to just continue on as they are. Godzilla reawakens, and now, with Mechagodzilla City active, is very likely to find them in just hours. In order to speed up the completion timeline of Mechagodzilla City, city, Haruo redirects all energy from defensive heat shields to offensive weapons. I wonder if they had just kept things as going, like continued to build Mechagodzilla City as planned, it would have taken a day or so, but would Godzilla have actually found them in that time if the camouflage was still active? It's very possible. Godzilla never finds them, and the plan works perfectly when it's time because they've had all the quality assurances done, they have multiple harpoons ready to go, and it's very possible that it was simply these rushed decisions that cost them the battle in the end. Basically, Icarus flying too close to the sun. They got too cocky trying to beat Godzilla before he could beat them. The humans protest the fusion between Bilosaludo and Nanometal, but Galagu explains that it's simply a way for them to turn into neural processors in order to speed up the city's construction. Galagu says he views Godzilla as humanity's greatest achievement. It's their greatest creation, but their biggest mistake was never finding a way to control Godzilla. They argue that they can evolve by joining Mechagodzilla City and turn themselves into essentially a monster, sort of proving Mephies was right. Again, Mephies would know this because he's had the ability to hear their thoughts this whole time. It really does raise the question, is Mephies an unreliable narrator, or is he simply sharing the deeper inner desires of others and being like, hey dude, they're not good people and they're gonna take over the planet? I don't know. I like the fact that they never truly say. It seems like Mephies is probably telling the truth, but he is also super unreliable. A debate then breaks out, which again, I think is really fantastic because it's a very well-written debate here, over if you really do become the perfect organism if you wind up abandoning your emotions in favor of logic and a hive mind. Does that even still qualify as human, or is it some type of other life that's not worth living? It's kind of the question that Evangelion raises as well. You know, like, if there's a central merged intelligence and all the emotions are washed into one, yeah, it would kind of logically wind up with everybody thinking super logically. It would wind up with everybody homogenizing in a way, but is that a life worth living? You sacrifice your individuality in the process, and what does that mean, you know? Is it worth the price of merging with technology in order to evolve? That's a question that we have to ask ourselves now more than ever, especially with AI on the rise, you know? In the future, what is going to be the price if you merge with an AI and that AI is super logical and it speeds you up and it helps your brain process and whatever? Where does your humanity end, and is that a life worth living? What's the point if you can't experience the emotional benefit of it? Yuko shockingly sides with the Bilosaludo here. She says it's simply better than living like the Hautua because we don't know what they're thinking. They're telepathic and they don't communicate. Again, I think they're really downplaying the Hautuas. The Hautua within a day have already started to learn human language. But it's very clear that Yuko's just jealous over Haruo's relationship with the twins. Mechagodzilla City then stops creating its camouflage in favor of directing all those resources towards building weapons, a decision made by the will of the fused, overriding the controls of Galagu, seemingly proving the Bilosaludo right, that by fusing with the city you become more effective and they can make decisions that override human capacity. However, it's this same decision, this potentially logical move to try and beat Godzilla before he discovers them, as the probability of him finding them is relatively high, that winds up costing them the battle because they draw Godzilla's attention way too soon as he immediately beelines towards the city the second the camouflage goes down. With an ETA of less than 1 hour, Godzilla winds up stopping in far enough range, because again he can shoot to space, that he can shoot a long distance atomic breath strike towards them. They tried to defuse it with their emergency nanometal mist, but they don't have a lot of time to disperse that, and it causes Godzilla's beam to wind up damaging the city as it isn't reflected as much as it should be. Godzilla in return winds up destroying one half of the EMP harpoons that were meant to kill him. In order to try and delay him, Yuko, Belube, and Haruo, trying to keep the peace between the Bilosaludo and the humans strong, after that whole debate really put them on a shaky grounds, he tries to keep the peace, all take to the vultures and take them into battle. And from here, the movie is kicked off into the highest gear. From that moment where the Bilosaludo turn off the camouflage onward, this movie is at an all-time peak. I think it's really, really fantastic. The pacing is great. The drama is really wonderful. It's not as action-packed and as spectacle-driven as some people wanted, but it's totally what I'm into. It's really cool, I think. It's just a little bit weighed down by the animation, I will say, though. Like, if it was better animated, it would be perfect. While trying to lure Godzilla to the trap point, they learned that that second EMP harpoon is completely beyond repair, so Godzilla effectively secured his survival with that one atomic breath maneuver. Godzilla tries his super oscillatory roar, which I think is awesome. It's one of my favorite powers of Godzilla Earth, very underused. I think this is the last time we see him use it. I don't think he uses it in the next movie. It's a super cool ability, but it doesn't do anything. It doesn't catch the vultures because they're so fast. The first harpoon then fails the quality test, again proving that they really shouldn't have put down the camouflage, as they they just were not ready to take on Godzilla. Godzilla arrives too quickly nonetheless, the vultures can't slow him down, and the plan commences, with the bombing out of the area around Godzilla causing him to fall into a trap below him. It's a very Showa era type plan, you know, that reminds me of King Kong versus Godzilla and sort of mixes it with a futuristic spin, like King Kong versus Godzilla's plan to trap Godzilla mixed with, you know, Godzilla Raids Again's plan to trap Godzilla, and then added in this whole futuristic twist. It's really cool, I think. Godzilla falls into their big nanometal hallway, and it's filled with that diffusion gas that causes his atomic breath to reflect all over the place, but again, it's still effective enough to strike a few things in the city, almost hitting Haruo, but in a weird scene that I'm not totally sure what happens, he's saved by the twins. I don't know if that's that they telepathically warned him to watch out for the atomic breath, or if it's that they literally redirected him, moved him out of the way of the atomic breath. It doesn't really say. He just says they saved him a second time. Godzilla is then heavily bombed by the vultures and by all of the cannons on Mechagodzilla City until he's trapped in a rapidly cooling liquid nanometal. I love that. Weaponizing the whole city against Godzilla is so freaking cool. First, something that was seen in Destroy All Monsters, but really taken up a notch here. And here they analyze Godzilla, they sync their attack with the noise, they destroy his dorsal fin after the noise does that little drop point that it does where it restarts, which reactivates his shield. Every couple seconds the shield drops and has to regenerate. When the shield drops, they destroy the dorsal fin, effectively stopping the shield from regenerating, and then the EMP harpoons are fired. But without a second EMP harpoon in order to fire those final fatal blows into Godzilla, it only damages him. And so he stands there and starts irradiating heat as he converts all of that rampant electromagnetic waves inside of him into thermal energy. I love this, and it really doesn't make sense in the next movie. As Godzilla approaches meltdown here, he becomes Scarlet Godzilla Earth. I think that name was first come up with by GNA, and it is fantastic. It is stuck ever to this day. To gain higher resistance to the heat, the remaining Bilisoludans fuse with nanometal. Galagu tries to force the humans to fuse with nanometal in the vultures too in order to save them and keep them in combat, but they're having some resistance. It's explained here how close Godzilla Earth came to dying. Very close. The reason Godzilla Phileas dies, it turns out, is because he tried to use an atomic breath attack after being in so much pain. He was trying to kill the people that were hurting him. As a result, all of that electromagnetic energy inside of him built up and he exploded like an atomic bomb. And here, Godzilla Earth does not do that, instead choosing to try and sweat out the pain. If they can provoke Godzilla into another atomic breath attack, he will die and explode. So I wonder if they started shooting him sooner if it would have worked. Otherwise, he will be able to release enough heat to return to stability, the electromagnetic waves won't be as rampant inside of him, and then he can start to use his atomic breath again, and then he'll be able to heal. They can also fuse with the nanometal and become kamikaze pilots, basically flying straight into the EMP harpoons, sending them further into Godzilla, damaging him again and causing him to react in a way that would make him explode. Yuko is able to sort of resist the nanometal as it starts to hurt her, and so she basically like forces it to try and stop resisting it as it's taking over, which causes her to pass out. Mephies then warns Haruo through a communication device that if he does this, if Haruo goes through with this plan and kills Godzilla, the Earth will be claimed by nanometal. Who knows how long that'll take? I'm sure they could have found a solution to stop it, but that's the fear, is that if Haruo goes through with this, the Earth will be consumed by nanometal. In reality, it's because Mephies specifically needs Haruo, because only a few select individuals across the galaxy can summon Ghidorah, and Haruo's strong will is one of those people. But then Mephies explains that if Haruo simply kills Galagu and destroys the base he's in, the nanometal will deactivate, and it won't consume Yuko entirely. Galagu warns that the only way to defeat a monster is to become one, and so Haruo is stuck between the decision. Is it worth killing Godzilla and potentially sacrificing humanity in the process, or is it worth allowing Godzilla to potentially destroy them anyways? On the one hand, you can ensure that Godzilla dies, on the other, you cannot assure that humanity can survive. But it seems more likely that humanity will die either way, so Haruo gives in and makes the tough decision with one final bit of telepathic encouragement from Mephies, and he rejects the nanometal, killing Galagu and Belubei in the process, and letting Godzilla reawaken, having sweated out enough of that rampant energy to go full thermonuclear mode, and Godzilla summons his atomic breath and melts Mechagodzilla City. As Godzilla wins, Haruo holds Yuko in his body, who now winds up in a coma because the nanometal was still fused with her enough to where when it was deactivated, she basically deactivates with it. In the end credits, the post-credit scene, we are treated to this wonderful little reverse sequence where Haruo's in agony and we wind up like reversing into all of these memories and all of this this influence that Mephi's has over him, basically showing that Haruo still doesn't really have free will. It's all Mephi's pulling the strings, and we wind up back in the conversation in the cave, where Mephi's reveals the name of the monster that destroyed his planet. The monster, Ghidorah. And that is where we leave it for this one into the next movie. I think that this movie is super underrated. Like, I get it. It's low on spectacle, it's a slow pace, but I really think it's a fantastic slow burn. The last 30 minutes of this movie or so are some of the best in any of these movies. I think it's fantastically written stuff. The drama is peak. It's just really well done. And that's because overall, I know not a lot of people might agree with this. Maybe some people do, I don't know. I think the human story in this movie is fantastic. I think it is fantastically written with deep psychological debates, themes, and questions. Plus, it's got these wonderful setups and deep connections to the next film. Like all of this subtle manipulation that's going on with Haruo and Mephi's. It's so good. The thing that holds this movie back is the kaiju story. It is deeply underwhelming, especially off the back of potentially having a Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla fight, and then for Mechagodzilla to not even activate in this movie, for him to just be a city. It is deeply underwhelming. And Godzilla is once again very underutilized, only showing up towards the end of the film and basically doing the exact same stuff he did in the last one. Although I will say, Scarlet Godzilla Earth is so freaking dope. Scarlet Godzilla Earth remains to this day my favorite version of the Burning Godzilla. It's my favorite version of that thermonuclear Godzilla. I think it is so cool. The animation is for me what holds this movie back the most, as to this day, while Polygon Pictures might have a pretty good handle on mechs and flying and explosions or whatever, I don't think they ever actually found out how to animate Godzilla. I think that's one of the bigger things that holds this whole series back, is I don't think Godzilla has a proper walk cycle. I don't think that Godzilla was designed in a way that he can move very well, and that's one of the reasons I think we see very little of him. I don't think they knew how to make Godzilla walk. I don't think they knew how to make Godzilla really look good in action, and to be honest, Godzilla Earth may look fantastic from like a very specific side angle, and maybe occasionally he looks pretty cool from the front, but overall, I actually think Godzilla Earth looks kind of dorky. I think that the design doesn't hold up as well from most angles. Some angles, again, I think it looks amazing, but most, I do not think so at all. I think Godzilla wound up being too bulky, too fat, and also those legs were too thin. I think there's a lot of things that hold that Godzilla design back, and I think that they never learned how to animate him, which is why all of the sequences with him kind of underwhelming. If they were better animated, it could be some truly stellar stuff, but instead we're treated to a lot of like really close-up shots of Godzilla, or zooming around his legs, or flying past him in a way that like he doesn't really get to shine ever, and the animation is overall what holds it back. Also, sometimes I'm into the art aesthetic of the CG animation, and sometimes I just don't think it looks all that high quality. The music in this movie I think is good but not great. We've got Takayuki Hattori returning again to do the soundtrack, and he's continuing his music from the last movie. We get some heaters in here for sure. I really like some of that Bill Saluto technology music. I really love the Rappel theme that brings back in the military march from the last film, but this score is a lot slower than the last one, and I do think it's not as good. It's a little more atmospheric, and to me it doesn't live up to the last score. So I'd say the music is good but not great, which is kind of how I would describe this overall movie. Well, I think the script is fantastic. I don't think the movie itself is truly great, but I do think it's pretty good. I would give this film a 7.5 out of 10 on a Godzilla-Thon scale, which is to say an arbitrary rating that I give it in just whatever I'm feeling at the moment when I write the score. I do really enjoy rewatching this film, but it is not one I return to a ton, mostly due to the slow pacing and due to the fact that it comes in the middle of a trilogy and it would be weird to just jump into this one. And I really do think Monster Planet is a harder barrier of entry for me than this one, because it has a lot less interesting themes to it. It's a lot less interesting drama in that last film. So I will give 2018's Godzilla City on the Edge of Battle a 7.5 out of 10. I think it's pretty solid. I have absolutely no clue what I rated Godzilla Planet of the Monsters, but I do feel I probably gave this movie a much more positive review than I did back in the day, and I probably gave this movie a much more positive review than most of the internet. Even to this day, this movie has very few fans, but I'm one of them, and I will always continue to sing the praise of the things the anime trilogy does well, while acknowledging that, yeah, I think the animation holds it back, the slow pacing holds it back, the music's not always my favorite, but some of it's pretty awesome, and of course, the lack of action does hold this series back. So I'll always acknowledge the flaws, but I want to be the cheerleader for these movies because somebody's gotta be, and I really do think that there's a lot of wonderful elements to these movies that, especially after the trilogy concluded with the full arc, I think there's a lot to love here, you know. With the third installment, I do think it all comes together in a really compelling way. But what do you think of Godzilla City on the Edge of Battle? I would love to hear your guys' thoughts. I'm sure that is a very controversial question. I'd love to hear, so comment down below and let me know. As always, I want to give a huge thank you to my patrons over on Patreon. It is through the support of the patrons that I'm able to continue to make videos like this for you. If you want to support the Patreon, you can use the link in the description below where you can get early access to content, access to the Discord community, and more. If that's not your thing, please consider joining as a channel member. Thank you guys all so much for watching. I cannot wait to jump into Godzilla the Planet Eater next week. I will see you all next time for the next one. D-Man, out.